So my idea of a good time is spending time with book people. And if you feel the same way, I hope to see you on Thursday, April 27th through to Saturday, April 29th at the Epigraph Literary Festival. It's a free virtual event that's all about books, the joy of reading, and the literary lifestyle. We also have an amazing author lineup, some great speakers, and fun sessions. So visit epigraphlitfest.com to register for this fun virtual festival. That's epigraphlitfest.com to get your free tickets. Plus, early birds get first dibs on event swag. So go to epigraphlitfest.com to register, and I hope to see you there. Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so happy to welcome author Brianna Labuskes to talk about her latest novel, The Librarian of Burned Books. This is a World War II historical fiction novel, and we meet three women who believe in the power of books. This novel was inspired by the true story of the Council of Books in Wartime, a World War II organization founded by booksellers, publishers, librarians, and authors to use books as, and I quote, weapons in the war of ideas, end quote. Brianna also talks about her writing and reading life, gives us book and bookstore recommendations, plus lots more. So let's get into the episode because I can't wait for you to listen to my chat with author Brianna Labuskes. Have you downloaded your free copy of the Biblio Lifestyle 2023 Spring Reading Guide? It's a free downloadable PDF guide that shares some of the best new books of the season, along with a list of fun things to do, spring-themed recipes, and tips to help improve your reading life. So visit springreadingguide.com to download your free copy of the 2023 Spring Reading Guide. That's springreadingguide.com for your free copy of the 2023 Spring Reading Guide. Now, on to the episode. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is an author who's written numerous thrillers, but she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new historical fiction novel, The Librarian of Burned Books. Please welcome to the couch, Brianna Labuskes. Hey Brianna.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yay, I'm super excited to have you here on the show. Can't wait to talk about your new book. But how are you feeling? How are you feeling now that it's out there and available for readers to get their hands on a copy?
Well, it's always exciting and also vulnerable. You pour so much into your work and then you just hope that people like it. And so I kind of I compare it to sending your kid off to kindergarten. Like you protected them at home and now you send them out into the world and some people will like them and some people won't. You can't really control that. And so it's kind of good to keep that in mind. But yeah, very exciting.
Love that comparison, by the way.
I stole it from somebody. I don't remember who.
No, but I love it. It's true. It's like you're excited for them. You want them to go out there in the world, discover new friends, make new, but not everyone's going to like them. It's not going to be all sunshines and rainbows. So yeah, I love that comparison. I think I'm going to steal that now too.
I feel like it's just like I'm passing it on into the world.
Yes, and I'm happy to receive it. Okay, so I want readers to hear straight from you. Tell us about your novel, The Librarian of Burned Books, and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
Yeah, so the book centers around the Armed Services editions, which were these lightweight paperback books that the United States government sent to soldiers serving overseas to boost morale. And I had never heard about them, but they sent them in the millions. And for example, The Great Gatsby was revived. Like it was it was this non-known novel, and then it got, as part of the Armed Services editions, it got revived in a whole new life. And so I thought that was really great. And then I kept reading about this program, and there was a censorship fight involved. And so this powerful senator, essentially for political points, wanted to cripple the program and essentially censor out all of the interesting novels and like leave them with cookbooks to send out. And so that really resonated with me. And so I really wanted to tell that storyline. And so that's kind of the pulse beat of the novel. It's what's driving the book. But during this fight, one of the main characters, her name is Viv, she kind of starts digging deeper and trying to find a way to convince the public to get on her side and save this program. And in doing that, she finds these libraries that were created in the 30s to protect the books that the Nazis wanted to burn. And so those kind of have a connection to two other characters, one who is in the 1933 Berlin with the book burnings, and one who's in 1936 France, working at one of these libraries. And they all kind of weave together and come together at the end for kind of a showdown with the senator.
Right, absolutely. So a lot of businesses boomed because of the wartime. So, for example, food products that they'd send abroad to soldiers. I also knew about the Great Gatsby booming because of that wartime distribution, but I never really thought about it, that there was an organization behind it kind of driving it. So that was very interesting for me to read about. But I was even more fascinated by the three women. So I'd love for us to discuss the women. Let's start with Althea. So that's the Berlin timeline. That's 1933. Tell us about Althea, who she is, and what's going on with her in the novel.
Yeah, absolutely. She came about because I knew I wanted to write that timeline. So all of my characters kind of were born from the time period that I wanted to set the book in. And they kind of organically came about because of what I wanted to show and highlight about that time period. So for Berlin 1933, I don't know how much you know about the history, but from when Hitler was named chancellor to the book burnings, everything moved really quickly. Especially with the Reichstag fire and them kind of handing over power to Hitler. And so I really wanted to see how quickly that moved, and I wanted it from an outsider's perspective. And to do that, I was like, oh, American, and then she has to be really naive, but she also has to have a reason to come over. And so she becomes this, prominent but isolated American writer who is in this program. It's a fictional program with Goebbels, under Goebbels, but I wanted to have her come over to Germany. And so she is one of my characters that I've put myself in the most. She is not naturally courageous, which I really wanted to explore, because I think in World War II novels, you see a lot of innately courageous women, which is wonderful. We should be telling those stories, of course. But they almost seem born for the moment. And I think a lot of us, at least myself, it's hard to be courageous. It's hard to buck authority, and it's hard to sometimes do the right thing in the face of danger. And for me, Althea was very much that narrative arc of her realizing that there are things that she needs to be courageous for, and really finding it within herself, even though it's not a natural occurrence within her personality. So I I loved writing her, because I loved being able to see her change from, oh, like the Nazis aren't so bad, and then kind of slowly realizing, oh my gosh, like this is a disaster over here. And I think that was really representative of what was going on in the world in general.
Absolutely. I love hearing that, for sure. So, okay, the next character is Hannah, and her story. Well, she escaped to Berlin and she's in Paris. So tell us about Hannah and who she is and what's going on with her when we meet her at the library.
Yeah, so she is my inhale. She is the world is kind of in limbo. She's in limbo and she doesn't really have a home, and the war is on the horizon. And she really reflects for me the time period of that mid to late 30s. And so she's just at a loss. She doesn't feel like Paris is home. She wishes she was in Germany, but she knows that's not really possible. And she fled because her brother was arrested for being a political enemy of the state. And she is one of those naturally courageous women that I was just talking about. I love, she's my favorite character. I think she's so strong and she's so powerful and she's sad. And I think she kind of always knows the right thing to do in the moment, but she's also very stubborn and she's arrogant, and I love her flaws as well. I found her very complex and interesting to write, and I always say she's my favorite character, but Althea is like me and we both love her. And so that was kind of my intention with Hannah.
And last, but certainly not least, and quite honestly, the character I was very enthralled by is Vivian. Now, Vivian is the character who will be going head to head with this senator. The senator's trying to censor the books that are being sent through the armed services editions, which, again, those are real editions that people collect, and I'm into book collecting. It's a very real thing. They are very hard to find, and a whole bunch of these books were printed and very few survived. So tell us about the Armed Services editions. Tell us about Vivian. And okay, let's do that for now because I have a really interesting question that I'd love your take on. So let's start with Vivian and the Armed Services editions.
Okay, yeah. It's just funny that you say they're hard to find because I've heard that from other collectors. And what I've heard from historians is that it's because soldiers would rip them apart and share them with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also kind of a disinterest in them, like right after the war. One soldier offered his entire collection to a museum, and they were like, "No, thank you," which is just wild to me now, like 70 years later. But yeah, so Vivian is. She's kind of spoiled. She's kind of pampered. She never really had a purpose in life before her husband dies in war, which you learn on the first page, so it's not a spoiler. And in his last letter, he talks about the Armed Services editions. And so she kind of takes this on as her mission, and she's really finding her voice. I really enjoyed her going from someone who threw parties and sold war bonds and was a lovely, intelligent, clever person, but she just didn't have a purpose. And now she has this purpose. And I think one of the reasons she is wealthy and pampered in the book is because the people who worked at the Council on Books in Wartime, which was the organization that was sending out the Armed Services editions, were volunteers, which is fantastic, but you also need money to support yourself if you're working for them. And so it actually ended up working out because I think her life, where she's not really used to hearing no or not getting something that she wants, really sets her up to confront the senator and have like the gutsy courage to just go for it, because that's her life and that's what she knows. And so I think sometimes I look at her and I'm like, oh, you're so soft. Like everyone else has to live through the war. But then at the same time, it really set up her personality to win this fight against the senator. So that was kind of where she came from.
Right, awesome. So here's the thing. For me, as a reader of historical fiction, I can't help but read these books and then look at our present day situation. You know what I mean? It's just like, is history repeating itself? How much have we learned as human beings? What are we doing different? But also, how as a society we've not changed and evolved. And the fact that, these books were sent to kind of boost morale, really. I mean, provide a distraction, but also encourage literacy, reading, critical thinking, just all the things that come from books. But even then, these books were seen as dangerous. I mean, Steinbeck was a popular author in these editions. Gatsby, obviously, very popular after the fact. Oliver Twist. There were just Willa Cather was an author as well. There are just numerous books that we read and appreciate today and we revere as classics. But, back then, they were seen as books that caused quite a bit of ruckus and trouble. So here we are in 2023. And there is a problem of banning books again today. I mean, as an author of historical fiction, you've written this book, The Librarian of Burned Books. There is this fight in this novel. I mean, were you thinking about present day as well and what's happening in our society? And do you see parallels? And I'm just really curious to get your take.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started writing this book in 2020. It wasn't quite at the height, but I do think fascism kind of has these beats that you can recognize. And so we kind of all knew where it was headed. So I think one of the most interesting parts of writing historical fiction is drawing the parallels. I don't think my goal when I'm writing historical fiction isn't necessarily to be like, this was exactly how they spoke and what they wore and all this sort of stuff. I like looking at it through a modern lens, and I like being able to say, we have been human. We have been human forever. And like, even if they seem distant from you, they're still making all the same mistakes, or they're still having all the same struggles or joys and triumphs that we do today. So I absolutely see parallels. One of the more interesting parallels, I think, is how unpopular this banning was, the censorship effort by Taft. He got it through because he attached it to a legislation that had to pass the Congress. And so no one wanted, there was so much fighting about the main legislation, which was for voting rights for soldiers. That no one wanted to rock the boat and be like, no, I'm going to like die on this hill about this censorship amendment. So it just went through. And you see that happen all throughout, United States history is you have these, it's pork or pet projects that get attached to bills. And it was deeply, deeply unpopular. You have all of these editorials and opinions, which I allude to in the book. The entire country came out and was like, this is not right. We're not supposed to be telling soldiers what to read. They're dying for us. And Taft, the senator, still wouldn't budge. And I think some of the parallels you see today is book banning is deeply unpopular. It is still deeply unpopular. We still have 70% of American voters saying they don't approve of book bannings in schools. And that only goes up when you talk about libraries and in general, the adult population. It's like 80, 90% of people. And yet it's still happening. And so I think what is important to realize throughout history is these small voices are amplified depending on money or power or politics or anything like that. And I think it becomes overwhelming to think about. Like reading the headlines recently is very, very scary. But for example, I just saw in Florida, one man removed 150 books, got 150 books removed from a school library. That's one person saying these 150 books shouldn't be in the library and having this huge outsized voice because people are scared right now and people are worried if they do something they could go to jail, which is wild. But Taft also had I think it was a jail sentence if people didn't follow his amendment. So I just think it's important to realize that you're not alone if you want to speak up about, book banning, against book banning. There's so many people who are with you. I think it's important to realize they're not popular, even if it can happen, and even if it's depressing that it happens. It's not the entire country. It's not everybody in the world wants to ban books. It's usually just a small amount.
Absolutely. I think it's just, sometimes the smaller voices are just so overwhelming. You feel like you can't say anything, you can't do anything. Maybe you start thinking kind of like Althea, maybe it's not so bad, maybe it's just, these couple. And then before you know it, again, that man in Florida being able to remove all those books. It is wild, but I think you're absolutely right. The majority of us want the freedom to read what we want to read. I really appreciated The Librarian of Burned Books. I think it's just, it's a captivating historical novel. You will be transported back to that time, but through reading, I couldn't help but think about the present moment. And I hope other readers will give this one a go because, yes, we're reading about history, but I think it's also reflecting the present, seeing these three women and how their lives kind of converge and how just everything that they've been through has changed them all. It's a haunting story, but there's also beauty in it and just power and just goodness of the written word. So if you're listening, I know you love books, so I hope you'll give this one a go because it's a book about books as well. And I really appreciated this one, Brianna. I really did.
Oh, thank you. I am obviously obsessed with books as well. So I love that I'm finding my people who just love the written word and the power of it. And that was just kind of my love letter to, it's my love letter to books and freedom of speech and even politics, getting involved and everything like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, I know we're here to talk about your book, but I want to dive into your process really quick. How
Yeah.
long did it take for you to research this novel? I know you said you started in 2020, but what was the research project like, and how long did it take for you to write the novel?
So the nice thing is that I have always been a World War II nerd. So I had a lot of background information already down. So it wasn't like I was necessarily researching timelines or important characters like that. So that really let me drill down into the libraries or the armed services editions and all sorts of things. So I my process is to kind of get the plot on the page
Mhm.
and and research as I go almost in terms of the smaller events of um, you know what exactly were they doing publicity wise for the armed
Right.
services editions. And so like when I'm writing that chapter I can really dive into that character, into that research. So it was really fun to be able to find little pockets of these like under researched things. But yeah, for the broader World War II era, the 1930s, it's always really been fascinating to me. I consume a lot of media about it, so that was kind of easy to and nice to have that base layer there.
Absolutely. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've gathered online, you got your start in, books and publishing with historical romance, but I'm more familiar with the thrillers you've written. So tell me about the decision to write historical fiction instead of just kind of sticking with the thrillers. I gather you love history and you do consume this content, and I can hear the enthusiasm, but tell me about that transition from the two.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know a lot about publishing, but everything is so far ahead. And so I ended up with my thrillers kind of having this a lot of time on my hands and you can only publish so many books a year. So I was like, I'm always so excited about historical fiction books. I love history. I love reading them. They're the ones that I get excited about. Why am I not writing in it? And so I kind of didn't press it. I was just like, if an idea comes to me, then I'll go for it. And once I kind of let myself do that, the ideas just like flooded in. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, let's do this. And so I actually wrote one before the librarian. And we didn't go out with that. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to try one more time and see if I can do it. And then we had the librarian and the rest is history there. But yeah, it's really fun. I find it, a lot of people are like, oh, you went from thrillers to historical fiction. But I see a lot of the similarities between the two genres. It's kind of human emotion amplified to its most terrifying extent in both ways. Extreme love, extreme terror, extreme courage, extreme cowardice. It's either a serial killer or a serial killer with an army behind him, right? So I think I really enjoy those playgrounds where everything is really amplified. And that's when you can really see human psychology and human relationships at play. That's what's really fun for me to write.
Absolutely, I can see that. So, looking back now, right, you have numerous books under your belt. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would you tell her?
I think to calm down a little. I was very nervous and very anxious all of the time, and I think one of the narratives around publishing is that you get one shot. And I think as you live through it, that's not necessarily true. You can, start over with a pen name, or you can go into a different genre, or you just got to keep writing. And so I think I would just be like, breathe, breathe through it. It's going to be okay.
I love it. I think a lot of us, even though not publishing books, can can relate to probably needing a breath.
I'm very interested in, I think you see this in the librarian and Viv storyline, is that we're kind of trained to think of a life as a mountain with like a cliff on the other side, where it's
Mhm.
all building up to this like grand finale. But life isn't like that. It's like hills and valleys and lots of landscapes. And I think that we need to really rethink of how we view success in our lives and the course of everything that we do. And a lot of that is, taking a breath.
Taking a breath, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Okay, so I'm curious. We got the librarian spy. It was interesting to hear you had tried with a previous book before that. But are you working on any other new books now? Any other projects? Historical fiction, thrillers, maybe? What are you working on?
I am in the weird period where I just turned in my second historical fiction. And that is based around the only successful mass protests in Berlin against the deportation of its Jewish citizens. There were 2,000 men being held in a detention center, and the protest was successful. And so it's kind of about that, and also kind of has different storylines that weave in together. It also touches on the restitution of books. So I think a lot of
Hmm.
attention goes to paintings being returned to owners, but the Nazis plundered millions and millions of books, from research libraries and personal collections and all sorts of things. And so um, there was a depot set up outside of Frankfurt, and that worked to return these books. And I thought that was, I had never heard of it. Anytime I find something where I'm like, I haven't heard of this, I like to amplify, I like to put in a book. And so that was so fascinating to read about, because I think with paintings you think, oh, you can't really replace a Van Gogh, but you could replace a book that's mass produced. But a lot of times books are so personal, and they have messages, and to, you know children, etc. And so to be able to return this property that was plundered was really moving to hear this, to read about the stories. So I really wanted to write about that. And then I'm starting my next thriller. So I'm in the transition phase back to from historical fiction to thrillers.
Okay, amazing. Well, all I was thinking while you're telling us about the historical fiction one is I've never heard that. I've never. Of course, if you took my books, I'd want them back. Thank you.
I know, and just the idea of, yes, my library is so small, and they were plundered, like these massive libraries, of course, these
Sure.
really rich libraries and research libraries. But the ones that always spoke to me were a there's a book that I researched about, used it for research, and it followed a man who was returning one book, and
Hmm.
he found the daughter, and he wrote the scene of him returning the book to the daughter, and it's
Hmm.
just so moving, just because it had her father's handwriting in it, and the father was killed in a concentration camp. So
Wow.
uh, it's just so moving, and so I really wanted to write about that.
I love that because so my paternal grandparents are no longer with us, but they wrote letters a lot, and we wrote cards every year. And obviously, with children, you encourage your children to make cards and so on. And they kept a bunch of that my sister and I made, but also I kept the ones that they made and purchased and, wrote for us. And it's quite, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just having something not
Mhm.
just that was given to you, but was actually inscribed. So whether it's a children book, like, oh, happy birthday, Victoria, wish it, because they would always include like, well wishes like every different year or something. I think it's just very incredibly personal. And I still kind of do that today now. While I don't mark physically on some books, I put index cards in there, So
Oh,
they are my bookmarks, and I'll write little notes and like, okay, I started reading at this date. Oh, loved this person, or just whatever little things, because some books I don't mark in, other books I will. but I could only imagine, because I still have the secret garden my nan gifted me. I don't remember how old I was. I'd have to go open it, but I still have it. And she wrote like a whole paragraph on the hardcover. So hearing that story, which again I had no idea about, I'm just thinking, yeah, if someone took that book from me, I would want it returned just because she had written this whole paragraph in there and I still have it.
It's such a connection. Books connect you in so many ways, and that's just another one. And you hear about people getting tattoos of their, mom or grandparents who died, their writing. And it's
Yeah,
just like you're saying, it's such a powerful connection. And it's so human. We all have, like, we're all relating to this, and they were relating to it back then too. It's just wild.
absolutely. I love it. So, needless to say, can't wait for that next book to come out. And
Yay.
you need to save space on your calendar for me so we can talk about it.
Absolutely.
I would love that. Okay, so speaking about books, another thing is, we love to know what our authors are reading. So tell us about the last book that you read that you now recommend.
So I just finished House of Eve by Sadiko Johnson, and it was fantastic. It's about two Black women, young women, like students, in the 1950s, and about pregnancy and motherhood and what it means to be an independent woman during that time. And I do think you can really see, like we were talking about, parallels are so interesting in historical fiction of just how far we've come, but how far we have to go when it comes to womanhood in America.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So, speaking of childhood books, I had shared I was gifted The Secret Garden. What
Yes.
was your favorite childhood book?
So I'm gonna say The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. And I it was the first, I was never really into fantasy, but it was the first book that I still remember to this day feeling sucked into beyond anything else. I know everyone who's listening is a huge readers, and that feeling of forgetting the world. That was like the first time I can remember feeling that way, of not really even knowing what was going around me. Like, my parents would have to call my name like multiple times before I woke up from it. And to this day, I remember that feeling. I remember the scenes that were just so enthralling. So that's kind of one of those books that just sticks in my memory for forever.
Oh, love it, love it. Now, there are tons of books coming out. What books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead? So, whether they're new books or books from the backlist that you never got around to, but share with us some books that you're looking forward to reading this year.
Do you know my most anticipated read coming up is called The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell? It's apparently like the Great British Bake Off meets Agatha Christie. So I'm so excited for that one. And then a right and worthy woman, which is about Virginia, the Black Wall Street in Virginia. It's a historical fiction, looks fantastic. Emma Donahue has one coming out, and she's one of those must buy for me. I love both her thrillers, and she does historical fiction too.
Hmm.
Um, and she does The Room. So she's just a cool writer. I'm gonna cheat on this one and say In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, and it's a queer love story set in World War One. I already read it, but I have to tell everyone about it. It's one of those that I'm like evangelizing about everywhere. I'm like, it's my beloved. So yeah, those are a handful of ones I'm excited about.
Awesome. So, as readers, I know, we have those hashtag reader problems from time to time. But if there's someone listening right now and maybe they're going through a reading slump, or there's someone listening and they haven't been reading much lately and they want to incorporate more reading in their lives, what tips have worked for you, or what would you recommend maybe they do?
Wow, that's such a good question. I would say, um, shake up the genre maybe.
Hmm.
Like if you're into mysteries, maybe try one like a historical mystery. Like try it in a way that's a little new, but a little bit of a comfort zone. I always help. It helps me. This is not a universal tip because I don't think everyone loves nonfiction, but nonfiction really helps me reset my palate almost, which is a weird way to say it, but it just kind of, if I have a book hangover or if I'm not sure where I want to go, I think about something interesting that I want to learn about, and then I find a good nonfiction about it, and either read or listen to it on audio. I'm a big audio book. I have a dog. I walk it a lot, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks. But that's kind of a nice reset, I think.
No, I agree. Sometimes shaking things up. I love the idea of choosing something adjacent. So
Yeah.
if it's romance, maybe a historical romance instead of, contemporary rom-commy or historical mystery. I love short stories, so
Oh, smart.
that helps me as well. Love the nonfiction idea. But now that you mentioned audiobooks, what was the last audio you listened to, or what's currently playing?
Oh my gosh, I just finished Stone Cold Fox by Rachel Kohler Croft.
Hmm.
Um, have you heard of that? It's a
Yes.
con Yeah, it's a con woman's daughter, and she's sort of running a con, but she's also just kind of living her life with the history of being a con woman's daughter. And it's billed as a thriller. I would just say it's a really fun character study.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm having a good time. I just finished it, so I had a good time listening to it. Don't go in thinking it's going to be super twisty or you're going to have to like guess at the ending and stuff like that. It's just like a really fun listen, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so in addition to books and authors and just everything, you know who we love too? We love bookstores. So share with our listeners some of your favorite local to you, or maybe a bookstore you discovered on your travels, but just share with us some of your favorite bookstores.
So I have to shout out Malaprops, which is in Asheville, which is where I'm located. And they are fantastic. My favorite part about their store is they have a banned books shelf. So they have a shelf that highlights all books that have been banned throughout history, and they like change it up and everything like that. So I always have to shout out them. My poetry and prose in DC, because I lived there for 10 years. So that used to be my local indie. And one that I'll shout out is the McDonald Bookshop, and it's outside of Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park, Colorado. And I had a friend's book coming out, and I was so excited. So I went down, and it's kind of isolated. It's an hour outside Denver, but it's like through these mountains and stuff. So I wasn't 100% sure her book was going to be there, but I went out on release day. And I got there and I was chatting with the saleswoman. She helped me find it. And I was just like, started jumping up and down. I was so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, here, you write one of these like local pick cards. And so she put out the book in like a special area and like put my card that I'd written that said like, I love this book so much and why you should buy it like near it. So I'll always have a special place in my heart for that bookstore.
Oh, love it, love it. That's awesome. Gotta love the bookstores. Really gotta love the bookstores.
And booksellers. I just love finding people who love books in general.
Right? I often say there are two times I go into a bookstore: when I know exactly what I want and then when I don't know what I want. And
Yeah.
they help me both ways. And sometimes I'll think this is what I want to read, and they're like, no, 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 no. You need to read this one. And I'm like, okay. And then I buy it, trust them, buy it, go home, read it, and then you just have to go back and be like, oh my God, this was so good. What's next? Or you're gifting someone something and you're like, well, I have that one friend. She's not really reading this, but she read that, and they just have the answers. So always gotta love them.
Now that you're saying that, I actually think that applies to our slump question. Like, maybe you're in a slump, go talk to a bookseller and see what they
True.
recommend. Yeah.
Absolutely true. And you know what? It's also true for librarians because they're the
Yes.
exact same thing.
Yes.
Um, because my real life book club, we tackle different topics and themes, and we try to read different books to bring different perspectives. And I promise you, every time I get a new theme, because the library's closer to me, I go to the library first and I'm like, all right, this is what I have going on. This is what we're reading for the next 3 months. What do you recommend? And
And
I
they're
always get such a great list, and we have an email chain, group email chain for the group, and I'll just say, okay, this is what I got, and have fun, pick one.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, and I do this, I'm guilty of this too, but I, rely on the internet to tell me like what books are out there. But actually talking to someone who knows this, whose their job it is, you're gonna find so many hidden gems.
Absolutely. And reading is solitary. It's a solitary
Mhm.
exercise. So it's good when you can reach out to someone like a real person and have a conversation. And the best part is when you find common ground and you're gushing over the same book or something in a similar genre. And it's kind of like sharing, not secrets, but I guess you could say that it's like, giving tips and advice, and just that's where the community comes in. So I appreciate those moments.
I mean, I was just thinking back to we were talking about 5 or 10 minutes ago, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, did you read that?" And then so it just it changes even like how you're speaking when you get so excited about it.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact, as I've heard it, when readers hear authors talk about the book, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Or, kind of getting a feeling for a character or the setting or just even just the idea behind it. It definitely brings clarity. So that's why, again, love having people listen to the podcast, love having people reading the news letter, but also love showing up when authors visit your town and your bookshop and your libraries, because it's a great experience. So it's a great way to then take this solitary activity to commune around something we love.
And I think it's kind of, not to bring it back to librarian, but I do feel like a little bit of that for the armed services editions was really connecting all these soldiers with each other, and they were all reading the same words and just created this like million person book club essentially of being able to really have a connection to home and to each other in really dark times.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, think about it. When you join the service, and my husband was in the service. He's now out. He's been out for years. He works privately now. But you're brought together with a bunch of people from so many different backgrounds. You have very little in common to start. So then I can't even imagine being deployed under these circumstances and just how dire they can be. So for them to receive these, the armed services editions, now they have something to talk about. Maybe if they never had anything to talk about before.
Yeah. And in some of the letters, they like what the soldiers would say, they had never finished a book before, cover to cover, before these were sent out. So it's a really, yeah, they're really cool. Like cool idea. Obviously, I read a book about them.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And on that note, kind of just wrapping things and tying it together again, I know you've done your job. You've sent your book out to kindergarten, joking. You sent your book out to the world, and you've done your job. You've written it, you've given it to us. Now it's up to us, the readers, to read it. But in an ideal world, what are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page on The Librarian of Burned Books?
I think I don't think people who are adamantly for banning books are going to pick this book up, but I would love people who maybe were on the fence or maybe could see both sides to kind of understand where this issue lays in history and how it can lead to really scary and terrible things. I also would love to have a bit of, I hope I plant a little bit of hope in the people who are kind of seeing the parallels and are seeing how dangerous the waters are ahead, that, you know, books have prevailed. There have been people have been burning books since there were books. And so they have prevailed so far. And so I hope they have a little bit of hope and a little bit of thought process of kind of where we are in history and in this moment in time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Brianna, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This was such a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.